don't recall what it was that I saw in the demo from Alpha Beta Gamer or Manly Badass Hero. I can't remember which one. But something stuck with me. Well, Steam recently announced its release. I hopped in head first with nothing more than minimal Steam store page information, and I don't have a better segue into this, so let's move on. Upon booting the game, you're introduced to a retro title screen, and past that is the option to continue with this little traveler icon. No new start, only the option to continue, and it transitions to an old map rolling out with little trees and various markers. An unseen narrator more or less tells you how each of these map icons work, and I do say, Inscryption does a great job with the pacing. The eerie narration keeps a spooky atmosphere as it explains each mechanic without becoming overbearing. And speaking of introduced, you meet a talking stoat that complains about your past plays. Don't worry, you'll hear a lot more from this little guy. The basics of this card game is that you have these little critters that need to be played onto the field in order to attack your opponent. Some critters require you to sacrifice a certain number of other critters in order to play them, as seen in the top right of the card, while others don't have a cost of anything. Certain critters also have abilities that allow them to fly, doing direct damage to the player, along with many other things listed in your rulebook, which can be accessed anytime during your card matches. I got the idea that maybe the stoat would be happier if I gave him an upgrade at the altar. I was wrong. So I gave the next upgrade to the more grateful wolf pup. He never complains. Next I battle a mean grizzly. That looks weird. But I've got squirrel in a jar, so I can block the bear's attack while getting wolf pup onto the field. An easy win next turn with 4 damage to top off the 2 from the last. Oh, okay. I didn't realize we were playing with Yu-Gi-Oh rules now. Big surprise, I lost the round and this jackass is all, I'm disappointed. And being commanded to get up from the table, this game just took on a whole new form of escape room? Yeah, there's a whole other game mixed into this, which brings more questions than it does answers. I grab a candlestick and poke around at some stuff before sitting back at the table. The narrator explains that each loss snuffs out a candle, and if all the candles are snuffed, I get sacrificed. A new card and another upgrade lead me to the first boss.
Don't panic now, Mike. You've simply got a case of grizzled old prospector syndrome.
Stoat gives advice for how to deal with this battle, and I follow said advice. Given he's now able to deal instant death to opposing cards, I aim for the mule, and would you stop sassing me? What is your deal? How did I manage to get nothing but turtles? Well, I lost. I was kind of creeped out with how his hands just go for you. However, I end up being dragged into another room, presumably to be killed, but he lets me make a little memento in the form of a death card, using the previous cards from my deck. Choose a cost, the power and health, and even a sigil before naming it. With a snap of an old camera, you transition back into the previous room, and you're introduced to another mechanic, bones. You gain bones each time a creature on your side of the board dies, which means your optional squirrels during the draw phase are much more useful. I also found that any damage that goes over the needed amount in a single turn is collected as currency, making this game feel more like a puzzle when trying to maximize the amount of teeth you collect. This is also where I start feeling conflicted on the whole card game aspect of things. Typically, you don't see your opponent's moves in advance in most card games. Part of the challenge is having to think ahead on what your opponent might be up to while relying on the strength of your own deck, what synergies work together, and how to handle unexpected plays. Inscryption does the opposite and makes it more of an ever-changing puzzle with a little forgiveness. I actually don't mind this type of gameplay, even though there are still signs of an actual card game here that sadly go unused for the most part. From here on out, you're allowed to get up from the table anytime you're not in a battle. I dug around the rulebook again, and I found a code for a safe, which led to another talking card. Except this one is happy to see me. It feels great being rewarded for exploring the environment, whether it be hidden treasures or even just getting new cards and even new items. Not to be confused with the usable items you get when on the map. There's a good amount of variety you get with usable items that can make or break a match when you're in a tough spot or uncertain of what move to make. Like when I was in a tight spot and needed to balance out the scales, I had gotten this knife from a puzzle that, according to the rulebook, says it'll help me tilt the scales. Oh god, why does it have to be the eye? You think? Why are there spares? I think this eye is broken. And I'm dead again. I shouldn't be too surprised with all the roguelike games I've played, but death seems to be an inevitability. This narrator does seem to be slipping though, leaving his camera on the floor for me to grab, but there's no film inside. Once more, I make yet another death card, flash back to the same table, and get my starting... Y'all good? Looking a bit rough. I go through a couple more battles, got a few more totem bodies for the squirrels, and oh hell yes! I could just use the knife again and get a few extra bucks with the overage. Whoa, this one is working way better this time. A bit of the subtlety gets lost when you're spelling out where to look, but I suppose this game is getting tired of waiting on me to figure things out. I look at the time and find a third talking card who warns me to keep the camera roll found inside hidden. At this point of the game, it's becoming very clear that things are not as they seem to be. Stuff in the cabin keeps changing little by little, the talking cards are taking drastic changes in appearance, and with the film roll in hand, I now have an end goal to work towards. However, there's still a few things I want to go over before moving on. Part of the struggle of card games is knowing what deck size works best. Smaller decks are more streamlined, but sometimes extra cards can offer more variety for situational planning. Part of the game mechanic for traversing the map is that you must pick up more cards, whether it be straightforward or through small challenges. There are certain tiles that allow you to consolidate your deck a bit, like the Mycologist combining duplicates or offering up cards to sacrificial stones to upgrade other cards. It still feels like it's sitting on a solid card game underneath the puzzle-esque battles. The puzzle aspect really does work well for the boss battles. I won't go too far into detail for all of them, but they're broken into two phases, each with its own unique obstacles to overcome, and you don't get any forgiveness during these matches. One loss and it's game over for you. A new map is unrolled, revealing a very short path. I got one of the three options to choose from before going into the final battle in a cabin. The transition is quite abrupt, the lights going out as you approach only to be lit by moonlight. Finding myself outside on a narrow forest trail, I cautiously make my way forward. One more offer is made for a boon. I managed to win one that allows me to choose which card I draw and... Oh no, not dealing with this. The narrator has three phases I had to overcome. Going through a ring of masks as a sampling of the previous battles for the first. The second was dealing with the death cards from before. But the final phase is when he decides to take the entirety of the moon itself, using his camera to turn his entire field into a single large card. This would have all been terrifying if it wasn't for Max the Lone Wolf. Yeah, the only downside to Inscryption's method of reducing deck size is that you can really overpower your cards. Granted, it no longer makes the battles feel like puzzles, but it also removes the challenge of the card game. There's a lot of balancing issues that need to be worked out, but I beat the moon and delivered the final blow. The last candle is blown out, and...
Oh my, I think I just beat him! Oh.